Allow me to thank you for attending this press conference. I wish to start by once again expressing our sincere condolences to the family of Odinga Wicca, who died tragically in the prison fires last Sunday. We in the People's Progressive Party would also like to wish all of those officers who are now hospitalized a speedy recovery, and to say right at the outset that we are in full support of our security forces to restore normalcy to our country in these difficult times. It was by their action and quick action that we averted what could have been potentially an even bigger disaster. We in the People's Progressive Party have exercised significant restraint in our public comments since this tragedy took place. And we did so largely to give space to our security forces and to the government with the hope that it will outline a clear path to addressing this situation. We did not want the issue to be politicized because, as is customary with this government, they will focus more on the blame game rather than addressing this situation, which is causing significant worry in our entire population. But time is going. We've had several days since the event, and what we have seen from the government does not give us cause for much optimism that they are being truthful and that they are in total command of the situation. Photo opportunities, press conferences, public statements are meaningless unless they're backed by substance. And what we have seen is an early attempt to absolve themselves from any responsibility whatsoever for the safety of the prisoners and the safety of the country and the prison officers. So, very early, hours after the incident, when the minister was questioned, about the Commission of Inquiry report that was commissioned after the last tragic events in the prison, or the last tragic events in the prison, he then said they implemented what they could have afforded and sought to blame money spent on sugar as the reason for them not fully implementing the recommendations. Now, at this point in time, no one, maybe with the exception of a privileged few, has access to that report. So they had a commission of inquiry. They had several recommendations arising from the COI. The minister said they implemented what they could have afforded, but they have not made public the report of the COI, in spite of us on several occasions calling for the report to be made public And in spite of a promise given by the minister to get it to members of the Parliamentary Committee on Security. So this government wants us to believe that they have implemented recommendations of a report that was commissioned, but they have not released the report to us. So we as a country, opposition and ordinary citizens, we should not know what is in the report because they refuse to release it, the report. And one must question why. Why did they refuse to release the report? Is there something adverse in the report that will make the government look bad? Or is it this instinctive way of working that the government must, with this government, particularly Granger's government, that everything becomes secret? Routine reports, routine documents become secret, as you have seen through several attempts to get the names of the prisoners who were released in the past by Granger. Now, in a normal society, this would have been revealed to the public. I remember when President Obama decided to do something of a similar nature. He had the Justice Department publish the names even before they were released to find out if people had any objections to that. In this country, we've been calling, the political opposition has been calling for this for almost a year and a half. We haven't received it. We went to the parliament to seek it, and they still refuse to give the names. So this seems to be the method of operation from this government. And what Ramjatan said was arrant nonsense. That he sought to blame sugar for the lack of implementation of some recommendations. Now, sugar seems to be the new source of all of our problems. As I said at the past press conference, first it was drug money that has caused Guyana, or cleaning out of drug money that had caused the economic malaise, economic downturn in our country. Then, when that excuse got worn and no one believed it anymore, because people saw who were not in drugs, they saw their livelihoods change because their economic activities were shrinking, then it became, we're spending too much on sugar. Sugar is sucking the lifeblood of the economy and our economic dynamism, which is not true too. But so every time something comes up, it's now the sugar workers that are to be blamed for it. And it is such a low-life sort of approach. I was sitting in Parliament when we were discussing some of the issues about appointments of people. And you recall the debate about the new unit being created in the office of the president to deal with innovations in the education sector. And some of our members of parliament were questioning about the procurement process for those to be hired, whether there will be publicly advertised, etc. And Ramjatan sitting, maybe inebriated, in his seat, he then said, yeah, we're going to bring 2 sugar workers from Wales to put them there. This is it. So sugar workers, he has a bitterness now to sugar workers because I believe he's been rejected. Totally can't go to those communities having lied to them. So now they're the whipping horse for everything that the government does. This is the same Ramjatan who sat in parliament I was with two of our members of parliament in the lounge, and he said, why should we spend on sugar? They're not going to vote for us again. We already know this. So very early, hours after the incident, we expected a Minister of National Security to deal with the matter in a non-partisan, serious way. He started making excuses in the blame game for his own incompetence. Total incompetence. That his ministry has been characterized by corruption and incompetence since he's been there. And he sought to blame other people. So Ramjatan, has to take responsibility for what's going on. He has to take responsibility, just like in the past, when they used to call on PPP ministers when there is a problem in the sector to resign. Well, I've seen there are lots of public calls for Ramjatan to resign. Maybe he should consider it. He should consider it. Or Granger should consider firing him at this point in time. But had it been only Ramjatan that exhibited these traits of incompetence alone, then we could have confined the call to Ramjatan. But it is the entire government that we have witnessed, inept, etc. So, you would recall after the first prison riots and, well, fire, when so many people lost their lives there. I had a press conference and I spoke about the concept of moral hazard. That if prisoners can light a fire, set afire the prisons, and then get the politicians, the top level in the executive, to go and meet with them. You know, if you want people to meet with them, then we are crossing a threshold in this country that will cause harm in the future for whichever administration is in power. Because in normal circumstances in most countries, you're not going to get a member of the cabinet to go to a meeting to talk about better food or better accommodation, etc. They would send a senior representative. But in this case, a fire got the attention of the cabinet. And I said, that may not be the last fire that we'll have. Because every time you want the attention of the government, you now just light another fire and members of the executive will come a-running. And where does it end? You create a moral hazard. And so I've seen now the government compounding this, and why I'm worried about it, because it gives a lesson, and it is going to affect us in the long term. As I said, whoever is there in office. So the government, in announcing the emergency measures, is just compounding the moral hazard. When it says now that we are in one of the 4 emergency measures, that implementation of legal measures to immediately reduce the prison population. Now, if the government felt that some people were in prison who shouldn't have been there, they should have taken these measures before we had the fire. So now they've decided to release a number of people. I don't know if the executive is giving instructions to the judiciary now. So we have to find out where the instructions to the magistrates came from. Because if obviously they were given instructions, I saw the newspapers reported, and I give an example, persons to be granted bail, therefore larceny, they defined the offenses, including larceny and maybe about 10 other offenses. So who gave the magistrates this instruction, and for what offense to give bail or bail? And then I see something like in the newspaper saying, however, conditions will be applied to bail granted to inmates that are charged for unlawful wounding and carnal knowledge. What are these conditions? Are we going to release people who engage in carnal knowledge, molesting children, and for unlawful wounding? Because what do these conditions that would apply mean? Someone needs to say who gave the instructions. The judiciary does not take instructions from the executive. And so when the minister announced early in the night, that is the hours after the fire, that they will do this and get the judiciary to do this, or the magistrates to do this, how did that entire process, because we have serious separations of powers issues here, how did that come about? And now the moral hazard of doing this. Should the prisoners now say, we want some early release, we want to be given bail, it's taking too long, let's set another fire in the future, because we'll have the government come running again to put in emergency measures, and 50, 60, 100 of us will get out. A moral hazard again, because you benefit from it, a number of people. And I'm wondering, what about those who will not release, and they see some of their colleagues being released now? What the discord in there now, in the prisons themselves. So we have to be extremely cautious about our approach to these matters, how this issue is resolved. We can't be expedient and sow the seeds for another crisis in the future. And I think this government is just so lost that it's expedient about everything. It's expedient about everything. Just get this thing over with. And in doing that, they are setting us up for long-term trouble with managing the affairs of the state in relation to security. And this is a government that is supposed to be strong on national security. They have a ton of ex-army people and ex-policemen. And so I am still concerned about lots of issues. But first of all, let me say right now the priority is the safety of the people of this country. And there should be a large-scale manhunt to recapture those who have escaped. That should be the top priority of the government, and to ensure that they secure the prisoners who are in the lockdown, so that we don't have an escalation of this problem. Those should be the top priorities of the government, the safety of people. Now, what is different now than in the past? One, you're not going to have this political opposition portray the escapees as freedom fighters, as they did when we had an escape from the prisons in the early 2000s. People were portrayed, with camouflage gear. I remember appearing on one television station in a ISIS-style video saying that they're freedom fighters. That's different. No political support from the opposition. And secondly, we're not going to go to any communities and ask them to provide safe havens for any escapees. So our security forces will not be shot at when they go into communities or have to face an entire community. You recall when our security forces in the past went into those communities, people were mobilized, children and women, to block them from going after the escapees. And Granger spoke about the period of the Troubles. That's why I said to him, you recall, he said he wanted a COI on that, and I said, bring it on. Because we will then find out what took place in that period. So that is not going to be the prevailing situation now. We are fully, this political opposition is fully on the side of our security forces. Fully on their side to restore law and order. So that's different. The climate is different. Nobody, no escapee, etc., would have political cover now, like they did in the past. And some of the same people who now hold serious or major positions in this government, you just Google their statements from that period. How much sympathies they had for the escapees who wreaked havoc on ordinary people. So that is our biggest priority. We lend full support, and we urge the country to do that to our security forces. Secondly, the government maybe should consider broadening it, being a bit more truthful. So they had a definitive number hours after the fire of 5 persons who escaped. And people are saying it's more, but I saw the venom that came out from the DPI, the Department of Public Disinformation, or yes, so information, and the venom that people were politicizing the issues. And then I saw the stupidest of excuse, the most inane of excuses from the head of that department, Imran Khan. He said, we couldn't do an accurate count because people were walking around too much. They were walking around, they can't do an accurate count, and you know how these prisoners are, they don't tell us their real name. But we're defending that there is only 5 who escaped. But the official line is still 5 escaped. And so they need to be more forthcoming. What has happened to the records of all of these prisoners? Were they kept there? Have we lost all the records? Do we have substitute or duplicate records in other parts of the government? Because if we do not, then what could happen now is that we may never know the records of previous criminals who've been in prison. If all of the records are gone, they need to answer about that, because people who've been in the prisons from pre-independence, we may have the records there. So if all of those are gone, and they're now electronically, you can't track people's criminal record anymore. And if we don't have case jackets elsewhere and files elsewhere, many of the existing prisoners, how do you take them to court now? How do you continue with the prosecution? Will it harm the legal case of the government? Somebody needs to say something about the records. So maybe they are held elsewhere, etc., that will give assurances to the public these are matters that need to be explored. I thought the government would have an emergency session of the parliament maybe and make a full statement by the minister, give the opposition to raise in a responsible manner issues, have a full debate about this issue. I still hope they will do, but given the nature of this government, how thin-skinned it is about criticism, then that may not happen. That may not happen, but that they still have that option available. So we wish the government well in restoring normalcy to the situation. We are yet to come to their bungling behavior, because we believe what we've seen in other parts of the economy, their incompetence is just being confirmed in this sector too. We're seeing the incompetence confirmed in this sector. So we will continue to be responsible. We don't want to divert the attention of the public and the security forces from what is the top national priority at this time, which is securing the prisoners who are in very difficult circumstances. I've seen some videos circulating where people are out in the open and they're like killing animals and all kinds of stuff. It looks like one of these jungle survival reality show, you know, and these things, it's unacceptable too. If you have those conditions and they persist for long, then it will create a lot of dissatisfaction. I saw the Kaichou News said that I should put some of them in my yard. Well, why they could put some? The office of the president has just spent over $100 million on building a fence there, a security fence. Maybe we should consider putting some of them there too. And by the way, it is easy when you have friends like the Kaichou News. This government is secure. Maybe Adam, you are working for the national award here that you got. So listen to the Kaichou News editorial. This is policy. To date, the government has spent hundreds of millions of taxpayers' dollars on COIs. There have been criticisms of these COIs, but there has also been ready acknowledgement and implementation of some of the recommendations by the administration. So I don't know, Kaichou News is privy to these things. One recommendation from the COI, so they switched to education now, into the education system saw the intervention of a remedial mathematics program. Less than 1 year later, the skeptics are singing the praises of the people who pursued the implementation and saw marked improvement at the national grade 6 level. So, talking about the COI on the prison fires and then switching it cleverly to the education sector. But this is how propaganda works. This government, you recall, 2 years have put out a flyer at the end of the year. In both years, they said achievements of the coalition government. And the first one is, in both years they had, the coalition government ended flooding in Guyana. So, in Guyana, they ended flooding. But we have seen the flooding, the flood situation in the country. But now it's the PPP has caused this one. Somehow we've caused the recent flooding. They said they ended blackouts. Go back and look at this. And then now it is, they're saying, well, you witness, you see what we have, a spate of blackouts across the country. You recall, immediately after they got into office, they said We are incompetent. Look at how the Skeldon factory is performing. And then a year later, it's a white elephant, never performed. So they're taking credit for an improvement, and I wish to thank. The only persons who should take credit for this are our children who did well, studied hard. Next year, if the results change, then they're going to say it's the PPP's fault. It has to be the PPP's fault next year. But taking credit and linking it to a recommendation from the COI that they implemented, there's no causal link. Absolutely none. And so, this is how clever, it's a clever way of shifting, excusing this government. All day long, the Kite Show News excuses the government. So they know of lots of ministers who are corrupt. But they want to have a meeting with Granger to tell Granger, under the PPP, they would have put the ministers who are corrupt and all the people in the administration. Why don't they reveal who they are? But in this case, they want to go be invited to the State House and whisper in Granger's ears. You know, get an invitation. They're begging for an invitation. You see it in the papers. The same thing. I didn't want it to be about the Kite Show News, but since fake news is a big thing now in the world, I have to take a dig here because it is notorious for fake news. And so that's a major thing in the world. I couldn't pass up on that one. It's like Nagamutu, no? By the way, he's gone quiet, so I don't have anything to say about him for a while. The next thing is distortion again. So Winston Jordan goes to the GMA meeting and he gives a speech, a long speech that has many people fawning over the speech, wonderful speech by the minister. And it means nothing, totally zero. Read the thing policy-wise, it is nothing. Not a single attempt to address any of the concerns of the manufacturing sector and the services sector in a tangible way. Not anything, just platitudes. And our private sector organizations have to be extremely careful when they invite these ministers to give these lofty speeches and nice photo opportunities as though they're concerned about private sector development in Ghana. And when the reality on the ground in the lives of their constituent members very, very different than is very different than what these people say. There's a big disconnect. So I'm not going to go through the speech because I've dealt with the IMF report some time back, the Article 4 consultations, and I pointed out how the IMF in veiled language pointed out the deficiencies in our system. The government's interlocutor is the IMF. You're never going to see the IMF come out and say, this is a bad government. They're the interlocutor. But the IMF pointed out a few things that are which should raise significant alarm bells in our Ministry of Finance, but even if the alarm bells go off there, they're deaf to all of this, and to our country at large. But they go unnoticed, the loud ringing sound. And it says, deterioration in the banks, in the portfolio. Bad debts are growing because of problems in the sectors. People can't pay their way, they can't pay their loans, the bad debts are ratcheting up. If the banking system is fairly sound now, but it could be a problem in the future. 2, the government is rapidly accumulating debts again. They pointed out that debt could go from 50% of GDP to 60% by 2019. It's a big trend issue that they're pointing out. The third thing, they call for exchange rate flexibility, and the government should consider auctioning currency. And if you have an auction, you know why the government is resisting it? I saw the governor of the central bank. Because in an auction, you will see the true price of the currency. Because this government has kept the exchange rate stable by bullying tactics, threatening, as I said before, the exporters to take away their licenses to export rice and gold, etc., if they don't sell at a particular rate. So that's why the IMF recommended auctioning of the foreign currency from the central bank. And so they pointed these things, and then they spoke about uneven growth. I don't want to explore those in great detail, but these are the buzzwords. When the IMF says these things about you, they're not going to come and say, oh, this is a bad country. Oh, the growth rate was 3.1%. Yes, those are the positive things. But then the danger is in this, in those warning signs. So I'm not going to go into great detail in Jordan's speech, but I just want to point out two things. In response to a question from the private sector, someone from the private sector, about the Amila Hydro Falls, Jordan has once again repeated the lies about the Amila. Now, they killed that project which should have started producing power now, this year. This was the year we would have turned the switch and hydropower would have flowed through the country. And there was not a single cent of public debt. Not a single cent of public debt for this project. I mean, no debt on the government's book, because the money was coming, part of it was coming from the Norwegian grant to buy equity into the project, and the rest would have been privately funded by the contractors who were selling power to us, some through equity and some through a loan, but not a single cent of public debt. But we would have bought power at half of the price that we were generating power at in 2012 because of the price of oil at that time, which was about 20 cents per kilowatt hour. We would have bought power around 10 cents per kilowatt hour. The things like the reservoir and the river running dry and all of that were dealt with, because the river can run dry in the dry season. You can't stop that. But if you have a reservoir, that's the purpose of building up water, and then in the wet season it fills up the reservoir back. So those technical issues were dealt with. So they said, Jordan said, this is a criminal project. They said there was some, implying there was some corruption. You remember the FIP Motilal contract, and I've urged the government to release the evaluation report that was done by the technical people when the bids came in. They have a copy of the report, and you would see that the politicians had no role in evaluating the bid, and we gave it to the lowest tender. And I saw some pictures from the road recently, and the part that was done by the so-called FIP Motilal, it's still holding up strong when we have all the problems across the country. But that's sad. So this is what Jordan said. Multilateral banks and these aren't financing these hydropowers and these big dams anymore. Many of them are gone out of business where this is concerned. We never approached the multilateral financial institutions, except in the American Development Bank, for some equity into the project, but not in a major scale, because most of it was coming from the private sector. So he is now shifting, saying the multilateral financial institutions will not fund this. But the idea was never to fund it through public debt. It was to fund it through the private sector. Interacting with business leaders at the Guyana Manufacturing and Services Association dinner, Jordan said Norway no longer has an appetite for the proposed 165 kilowatt Amila Falls hydropower station because Norwegian consultants have found several areas of concern. So he's saying that Norway doesn't want this project anymore because they have found several areas of concern. Now, after pushing the government to hire the Norwegian consultants, this is Norconsult, is a huge company, and they have major experience in hydropower development. This is what the report said. So page 3. The only realistic path for Guyana towards an emission-free electricity sector is by developing its hydropower potential. On the same page 3, the new APNU AFC Plus government has confirmed its devotion to the low-carbon development strategy, which was introduced by the former PPP civic government in 2009. Now they're economy. Page 38. With regards to the soundness of Amila Falls hydropower project, we regard the soundness of Amila Falls hydropower project as evident, and in order to follow up the intentions of the LCDS as fast as possible, we recommend the preparations for the AFHP to be resumed. So they said, we found its soundness to be evident, and we urge the APNU government to resume preparation for its implementation. It goes on to say on page 4, it is our opinion that the booth-type public-private partnership model should be maintained for the project implementation. An internationally well-merited investor and operator in the hydropower industry should be invited to take the majority position. This is what it says. As regards the corruption, on page 12 of the report, after competitive bidding between 5 pre-qualified candidates, AFHI, that is the Amila Falls Hydropower Incorporated, in 2008 selected China Rail Forest Group as the EPC contractor. So there was a public tender with 5 pre-qualified bidders. And then on page 32, the most telling thing, constructing Amila Falls would cut electricity costs by more than 50% for the energy produced by the AFHP, or US dollars 3.3 billion over 20 years. Now Jordan is talking about that's the sugar industry. Jordan is talking about saving money, reducing costs. The figure is, and Adam Harris, I hope you publish this figure, 3.3 billion US dollars in 20 years this country would have saved. Nearly 700 billion Guyana dollars by building Amila's Fall. $700 billion. And you know who would have saved it? The consumers of this country. 700 billion Guyana dollars in 20 years we would have saved. We can find $9 billion to keep sugar for the next couple of years, transitional support. We can find $1.7 billion to keep the grant to our school kids, because they said it's not affordable, the 10,000 grant. But we killed an opportunity that would have saved $700 billion in 20 years. That's over $30 billion per year. We killed it. And Jordan goes on with this thing about, he says the Norwegian report said the project is useless. Norway has no appetite for it. He told the manufacturers. And somebody should have asked him, gotten up and asked him, have you read the report? Have you read this package of documents we sent, totaling 3,000 pages, including the EPC contract, the environmental studies, the feasibility studies for the project? None of them read it. I talked to members of parliament and they still repeat, oh, there will be a big debt on the treasury. Jordan still believes that is the case. It's not so. They have not read, when they were in opposition, the document, and until now. This is the kind of, I don't know what passes off for management of our country. I can't find a word to describe it outside of incompetence. Outside of incompetence. And nobody says nothing to challenge him. A total lie at the GMA. And the big complaint was about reliable power and cheap power for people. And they killed an opportunity. And they continue to lie about the project. And then he made a very interesting confession. Jordan said that raking in arrears is what is saving us. And this coming from a minister of finance is an admission that this government has a failed economic strategy, if it has one. Because you're saying now that the only thing keeping us going is money or wealth created under the PPP that you're now taxing and pulling in reserves. Because you know there's a big shortfall from current level of economic activities. In spite of all the cleaning up of customs. Imagine this cleaning up of customs and the GRA and the lack of, no corruption there anymore, should have raked in billions of dollars on current economic activities. But he's saying now that it's money, it's wealth created under the PPP that we are now pulling in these reserves, arrears that people are now paying up some of their taxes, that keeping us afloat. If this is not a failure or an admission of failure, nothing is. And it went unnoticed. And so what are you doing to change it? What are you doing to change it? And then someone needs to ask the question, how come you have such a big shortfall in VAT collections, when if you look at even making government agencies VATable and charging 14% on government expenditure in certain categories, you should have collected probably, maybe by now, I don't know what's the level, expenditure level, but even if they did 20% of the total capital program and the recurrent budget, or expended 20% of the total capital budget and the recurrent budget that are VATable now, they should have collected over $4 billion from government expenditure alone. And the reduction in the rate from 16% to 14% would have resulted in a loss of about $4 billion. So I don't understand how they came up with these calculations. So when we see the details, but the details are going to be very hard to get out of them, then we can do a proper analysis of what is really going on the taxation side. In the meantime, Jordan will meet with the forestry people. He met with the miners. By now he should have admitted to them he made a mistake by increasing all the taxes, and he should promise to do what we've always been saying in the PPP, that when we said he was wrong and the government is wrong to put the taxes, reverse them on mining, the same taxes. And when he meets with the people in the forestry sector, I hope that he seeks their forgiveness and he does the same thing for the inept policies they've put in place, these sector killing policies that they've put in place, that he should first of all apologize to the people in the private sector and then remove these taxes. And I see Raphael Trotman will be speaking also at another private sector organized activity, the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce, I think, has him as a guest speaker. Well, the issues that he avoided answering in Parliament, they should question him on those issues, because Raphael Trotman runs from technical issues if he doesn't have his staff writing it down for him on paper. So in Parliament he said, when I said we should look at the Norwegian model, he said literature says that the model is outdated. Well, he should point out what literature says this, because as far as I know, it's the most successful model that was implemented by a country, oil producing country in the world, that had integrated oil proceeds without damaging the rest of the economy. So, which other model has been implemented and will? He should say that to people, and he should talk a bit more about the Sovereign Wealth Fund and the principles that we have been talking about, what the principles governing the fund on a technical basis. He should explain to people why he wants to be the board if there is no board in place for the Petroleum Commission, why he wants to be the whole board, and if there is no chairman, why he wants to be the chairman rather than allowing the CEO to act. He should go there, he should explain his promise that they will start constructing this year a $500 million US facility in Crab Island, how far they've gone with that. And he should explain the public statements from the government about the spending in the sectors. Not to come again and give a speech of platitudes, oh, oil money will come, etc. And he needs to explore, as I sought in Parliament, the volatility of oil revenues and how that volatility is not factored into this government's explanation of the prospects of the industry. So what I'm saying, I was out of the country, and so I did not respond earlier to these things, but we can't allow a lot of them to go unanswered, because they create this facade of efficiency and competence. Canned speeches don't do that. It's your ability to address policies. And you saw how Harman jumped on the sugar thing. That was a routine thing. There was no big deal. There was no ill intention. So now Harman, when he saw that figure, that he believed, I think he believed that it was true, $300 and something billion, he said we were ripping off the sugar workers. Imagine that, from sugar taking up all the money to we ripped off the sugar workers. Well, now that he knows that over $34 billion came in from abroad for sugar, that sugar has never been a burden on the Treasury. Never been a burden on the Treasury. That $34 billion came in for the sugar industry, and that the debts that they're talking about, the 80-something billion dollars of debt, much of those are pension liabilities and debt owed to the government, etc., that they will take a different course on sugar. Because all along, sugar was a burden. So, these are a few of the things that I wanted to talk to you about. Thank you very much.
Sir, if your administration had been faced with a similar situation where you would have had to move more than 1,000 prisoners to where they are, what would have been your approach to ease the pressure on the system? And two, following the 2002 jailbreak, what specific measures did the PPC-led administration implement in order to avoid the recovery?
Yes. Well, there were several issues that we dealt with over the period when we were there. We had contracted loans to deal with criminal justice reform. In fact, some of the loans that we contracted, the security sector want to, still components of it still have an impact on prison reform. But a criminal, it was a sector reform project that dealt with criminal justice reform, including sentencing policies and a whole range of issues. I recall the ministry bringing a plan for the prisons that dealt with a number of things, including more officers, better training. I recall personally speaking to the Army to train people through the cadet program to support middle-level management that would eventually go up to the top of the prison services, like we did. Programs to give the prisoners more skills, etc. I can't recount all of the things we did, but the proof of the pudding is in the eating of it. And for 23 years we've been in government, and we were seen as weak, having no national security experience, like this overladen with national security experience, this government that is overladen with it, so overladen it's getting fat on it. And we didn't have a situation analogous to the one that happened last year or this year. We had a breakout of the prison. And you would recall the difficulties we had, the political environment in which we had to fight the crime. And that is why I started off by saying, what is different now? And so I would urge you to look at the context in that period. Go back and look at the statements made by the political opposition at that time and see the ones made today by us, where we give full support to our security forces. At that time, the security forces were painted as they were killers, that they were killers. Every time they went after a hardcore criminal, that they were killers, PPP or sponsored killers. And when they went into communities, we've had leaders from the current government who visited those communities and told people to resist the security forces coming in. That's different, Dennis. That is different now. This PPP, this opposition will never do that. Encourage criminals to take over our communities. It's not just what they did to the people outside or places like Buxton and maybe Agricola, because what they did was horrific, killing babies and all of that, innocent people, policemen. Lots of those policemen who they killed are on the list of people that the PPP was supposed to have killed in that time. You know, the list of 400 that they keep mentioning. But what they did to those communities, Agricola and Buxton, for a long time they stigmatized the communities. Young people from those communities said to me, when we went to look for a job, from the time people see where you live, they don't want to give you a job. For years after. Because many of those people lived in fear in those communities. They couldn't come out their houses, walk freely. The trucks stopped going into the communities, selling stuff. They were in fear. Girls were raped in those communities, but they were scared of speaking. The atrocities that they allowed, giving political cover, to be committed in those communities are untold. And that's why I want Granger Commission of Inquiry, because he loves those. I see we have one into the assassination of the president, and now they're inquiring whether the police did their job. This is all undermining the police too. You're undermining the security forces. You want them to go out and find these escapees now, and you have a COI checking whether they investigated thoroughly some threat of your assassination or some threat of assassination. Don't we have anything better to do? And I hope we're not going to have another COI on this one here without the first one even being released, I said, the first report. So that's different now. You're not going to have us support. We stand unequivocally on the side of law and order. We stand unequivocally, even if it means supporting this government with all of our differences. We stand unequivocally.
The first question, what your administration will differently and you will face with 1,000 persons locked behind in a pasture? How will you ease the pressure of the system outside of having the magistrate?
Dennis, you are asking me to be government now. When we resume power, we'll deal with it.
But you're criticizing.
Yes, but the thing is that, so I see that's the only bright spot. You know, I can deal with lots of hypothetical. All right, I would have had secure vehicles go up there immediately. I would have probably found a better place to accommodate them than Lusignan. Maybe in one day the same construction, an indoor facility, like say you want me to deal with hypotheticals, say the gymnasium, and then make sure that you have 4 sentry points around the gymnasium with high power, people with high power rifles, and the army maybe around there. So people would be indoor, not in a field walking around. The sheep looking like this is bemused. Well, look, not bemused, puzzled. I look at the face of the sheep that was in the pasture, saying, what the hell is going on here? I look at that, it was funny looking at the face of the sheep, but it's not. If you keep people like that for a while, they're going to get worked up. I see people holding down a cow, saying, no food come here, we got to cut this neck. What is this? What is this? You ask me, but I can deal with hundreds of other things.
But specific to the point.
Yeah, because they're taking credit for that. These people are taking credit for it. It's our security forces acted well. I am in support of our security forces. But the government has to give leadership. The government needs to say what's happening at the gymnasium or some other facility. Take the people in there, at least they will be in a sheltered environment. You drop them like cattle in a pasture, and then, you know, they're going to get worked up too. The elements are there. One little tent I saw the first day. I don't know if they've built other tents now. But like, and then all we see are visits to the site in suits and you know, as looking very official, as though they're working. That's not working. That's wasting time. That's photo op. That's for DPI and Control. That's for that. That's not for a serious government. So I didn't want to deal with the hypotheticals about how we deal with them, but you asked me so I'm telling you. And that just came off the top of my head, and I can think it. So I didn't give it serious thought. But, yeah. So much less if I give it serious thought, I think we've done a better job.
So let me ask you a quick question.
Yes,
this has to do with the failure to release the COI report in the prison Friday. It's the same thing that happened during the 10-year government when Minister Rohi refused to release the report under the NA prison riots when people lost their fingers. Is it a trend to keep reports on the wraps?
Yeah. Adam Harris, we were bad guys. We in the PPP, we were horrible people. We were supposed to be corrupt. We were supposed to be incompetent. We were supposed to be discriminating. We couldn't manage the country. This is the enlightened bunch. This is supposed to be the enlightened bunch. But the thing is that when people lost their fingers there, right? That's what you said to me?
That was one of the
things. Oh, right, the finger. Rohi didn't release the report when a man lost his finger.
And other things.
Right, and other things, right? But you had 17 people killed. in a fire, and you know, this is comparable. Is this comparable?
No, the issue is reports, sir.
Reports.
One didn't release a report.
And I don't know. Maybe a report. I can't tell you why, but look at it. Just think it through, Adam. Forget the politics and the national award now. The thing is that they think it through. 17 Guyanese lost their lives. 17 of them in that fire. It's the worst, I think, in the Caribbean. Is it not? It might be the worst in the Caribbean we've ever had. Don't you think that the report should have been done? We are hearing from the government they're implementing the report, and you haven't seen it. Are you not curious about it? Are you not curious?
We can get it.
You can get it, or you will have privilege. No. But if the Skytro News can secure it and send it to the other independent newspapers.
No, I can get it too.
I wouldn't get it.
Mr. Jeffrey, Headline News, Channington. Mr. Jeffrey, you talked about the death of the Manila Falls project, that it was killed. You mean it's a scale for this time, or should your government be elected? Can it be resurrected?
Yes, but you'd have to go back through the tender. A lot of the technical work has been done. That's what we're saying to the government, and the report has done that, because the last tender was in 2008, so it's nearly 10 years. So that tender is outdated. We say, look at all the studies, the design, drawing, because substantial amount of work, money being spent on it, the environmental studies. If you have to tweak it a bit, tweak it, and then put out another tender and try to you'll get private investors. You'll get another private investor to come in and do the project.
So you say that PPP is still committed to that?
We are urging this government to do it, because we are committed to it in the future. We'd like to see the project going. That's why I've been calling on them to look at the project seriously and to restart it. Because I pointed out the benefits also of it to the country. Just imagine you have $700 million of private money being spent in the economy. The boost it will give to our gross domestic product, economic activities here, etc. So it will make a big difference in Guyana. And at the end of it, you save billions of dollars in electricity costs. So right now, I'm urging the government to please read the documents. You have to beg this government to read documents. And then look at the benefits of the project, have a team look at it, we prepare it back, go back to tender, and let's resume the project.
The second question is, you spoke of the need, or the event, you said that the records were probably burned in fire.
I don't
know.
Yes.
Did your administration seek to have the records kept other places other than everything?
Frankly speaking, I don't know. I don't know if they were. That's what I said at the beginning. I don't know if they were kept elsewhere. That's what I would like the government to say, if they're kept anywhere else. I don't know.
Mr. Jagdeo, Kurt Cameron News Source. Could you update us on the compilation of the next income list?
We've just gotten about 10 names that we've shortlisted from different organizations that submitted names. They needed some time, so we shortlisted 10 now persons. So from the 10, we now have to go down to the first 6 that we'll talk to. But knowing let me give you an indication. One of the 10 already said to me, no. I don't want to be subjected to public humiliation. So I'll now have to talk one-on-one with those people. So over the course of the next few days, I'll do that.
Just a quick follow-up. Also, could we see that list being presented to the president?
Yes, I don't. You see, that is it, because I have to go through the process, meet people, talk to them. Some of them say to me, we got to talk to our family. So I can't say, I need a word from you immediately, call you to a meeting and say, will you agree to your name going on the list? and you have to tell me in 3 minutes. They would say, can I get a few days, a week to talk with my family and that sort of thing. So it's not a process that you can almost shortcut.
Will the party list include names for the first two that you're done?
Right now, no, because I can't. If I do, then that could be another excuse of the president to say, look, he's being provocative. He's being provocative.
Mr. Jagdeo, could you say what are your thoughts on the privatization of the prison system?
All of those things are too early to talk about. I just believe that we should have an efficiently managed prison system. There are huge cost implications for privatized prison. And the experience in the United States is not all that great, because sometimes you have a lot of corruption because people make money based on the number of prisoners they have, the private guys. And so they are interested in getting more people locked up because then they make more money. And I don't think a society should aim towards that. Yes, if there are ways that we can manage the prison through the private input, or once the costs don't escalate too much, or it doesn't change the concept of justice, then we should explore everything. But right now, I think it's not on the table. What is on the table now is addressing the current situation.
Mr. Jagdeo, for Mr. Cabinet's president,
Yes.
are all 10 of the president's members of the legal profession?
No. Remember, the government has itself said that you can submit now from other, the fit and proper category.
So, how many were fit and proper?
No, I can't tell you that now, but if you look at the letter that I received from the president, they conceded that point.
Mr. Jagdeo, I know there's still some more work to do on this list, but I wanted to gauge your level of confidence at this point of reaching an agreement with the president once this list is submitted.
I don't know. Or the president could wake up and like it, or Adam Harris may say something
Not
nice
to
about
say
it.
nothing. I'd say good thing about you when you're competing with another incident right now.
Oh, okay, really? All right, thank you very much. What's the other incident?
Some shooting in the box tonight.